This is Representative Pramila Jayapal. She is the first vice chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, Democrat who serves Washington, and a member of the Judiciary Subcommittee on Immigration and Border Security. Good morning.
Good morning.
First of all, your thoughts on the release of those North Korean detainees, and particularly what it means not only for their release, but larger issues at play when it comes to relations with North Korea.
Well, this is an interesting time. I think that, President Trump is not the first president to get detainees released. So obviously it's wonderful news for those individuals, for those families, for our overall relationship. I think the question is, how does this impact the summit? How is it being leveraged for any summit that might happen between the president and Kim Jong-un? And I think we'll have to wait and see and make sure that this is not somehow a tit-for-tat relationship that diminishes our leverage in future negotiations.
What does diminishing look like to you?
You know, it could be any number of things. I think that Kim Jong-un is a very smart man. I don't think he does very much that I think he's terrible in so many ways, but I don't think he does very much without thinking he's going to get something back. I don't know what that is, but our goal is to make sure we don't go to war with North Korea, that North Korea does not continue to manufacture and use nuclear weapons. I mean, these are the big things that are on the plate for the United States. So we can't get diverted from that in any way, and we can't think that he's a good guy just for releasing these three detainees and somehow have him come out ahead on this deal.
On other issues, Representative Jayapal, there is a story in the Washington Times today talking about House Republicans, their interest in launching a petition when it comes to a vote on so-called Dreamers. Could you set this up and tell us what's happening?
Yeah, so what happened is President Obama passed the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, DACA program, which allowed for about 800,000 Dreamers to have legal status, be able to stay here and work. There was no permanent path to citizenship with that. It was not passed by Congress. It was an administrative action because Congress had not yet taken action. When President Trump came in, he rescinded that program and threw the lives of these 800,000 Dreamers into chaos. Across the country, there are about 1.8 million Dreamers, not all of whom have applied for the program, but are in the same situation. So it's a significant issue. About 95% of the country agrees in red and blue districts across the country that these Dreamers should be able to stay. They're young people who came to this country when they were very, very young, brought by their parents. Often they haven't been to any other country except the United States. They don't speak the languages of any other country. They are as American as you and I are. And so President Trump said, Congress, you need to do something to fix this, so that's why I'm rescinding it. It was a cruel move because it threw everything into limbo. What happened after that is Republicans have refused to pass any kind of a permanent solution, even though we have bipartisan agreement that we should. There have been numerous bipartisan proposals that have been taken to the president. He has every time rejected them, even though he said at the very beginning, just bring me a bipartisan proposal, I will sign it. That has not happened. There are Republicans who care deeply about this issue and are worried about their seats and need to do something on this. And so it has been a constant thing for the last year. And finally, Carlos Curbelo has filed a discharge petition. I think there are 17 Republicans so far that have signed it. They need about 8 more. Once they get 8 more, and if every Democrat signs it, no Democrats have signed on as yet, then we will have 218 signatures. That would allow for what's called Queen of the Hill. And for people who are out there listening, I had no idea what that was before I came to Congress. What that means is it sets up a process where 4 bills could be brought to the floor at the same time around immigration and Dreamers specifically. 2 are bipartisan, bicameral proposals. One is from the Hurd-Aguilar bill. One is Carlos Curbelo's bill. There's another bill that's not written yet that would be Speaker Ryan's offering to the pile. And then there is a Goodlatte bill, extremely restrictive bill that is not bipartisan that would also be a part of the process. Any one of those that garners 218 signatures would then pass the House. That's called Queen of the Hill. To me, it sort of feels like they're ants crawling up a hill, and whichever one emerges, holds the flag at the top. And in a way, that is sort of what it is. So that's what Curbelo has done. He's filed a discharge petition. We're waiting to see if he can get enough Republicans that it would be worthwhile then for Democrats to sign on. We've already signed a discharge petition for the Hurd-Aguilar bill. We have put forward numerous bipartisan bills, and it's really a shame that Speaker Ryan has refused to bring anything to the floor. This is forcing his hand. Republicans are forcing the Speaker's hand to bring something to the floor.
I'll introduce callers if they want to ask about this effort on immigration, particularly when it comes to those dreamers. If you want to ask our guests questions about that or other issues, 202-748-8000 for Democrats, 202-748-8001 for Republicans, and 202-748-8002 for independents. You should know that our Capitol Hill producer Craig Kaplan saying that there's a 13th House Republican signing this discharge petition. That's at the clerk.house.gov if you want to read more. If it does get to the floor, ultimately then what does it mean for those dreamers? What could it mean?
Well, if it has to pass both chambers, and then President Trump has to sign it. So there's a process. But if it gets through the floor, that is clearly showing that this is a bipartisan bill. We would then have to pass it in the Senate. If all of that happens, then 1.8 million dreamers would be protected across the country, would be able to contribute to the economy. The studies are off the charts about the economic benefits of dreamers in this economy. You know, these are great young people who have a lot to contribute. They have been working. They have been contributing billions of dollars. And so now what we need to do is make sure that they can stay here, have a path to citizenship, not keep making them a political football, which is what they have been. A political football that just keeps getting tossed back and forth, but actually give them some stability. It's humane, it's compassionate, it's the American way, and by the way, it's good for our economy.
1.8 million, could that number grow, or does it stay strictly at 1.8 million? Or
no, there's restrictions around it in terms of how old you have to be, you know, various things that basically prevent it from growing. So it is that number. There's usually a date in the legislation, depending on which thing we pass, that says, you know, before this date. So no, that's the number.
Is the case you would make to allow dreamers to stay in the country just purely economics, or are there other reasons they should stay?
No, look, immigration has never been about immigration policy. Immigration has always been about who we are as a country and what we're willing to stand up for. I mean, this country was built by immigrants, unless you're Native American, willing and unwilling, who came over on slave ships, and every single person has a history. I am actually a first-generation immigrant. I came here when I was 16 years old by myself. It took me 17 years to become a U.S. citizen. And so for these dreamers, there is absolutely a moral case. There is an economic case. These are young people who literally, in some cases, found out that they didn't have documented status here when they applied to go on a field trip, or when they decided they were going to college and they needed to produce something, or when they were going to get a driver's license and they needed, you know, to have certain documents. So a lot of these young people had no idea that they were, you know, that they didn't have documented status, and they really are as American as you and I. So to me, it's a moral issue. If someone wants to make the economic issue, I can certainly go there, because it is a huge economic argument to be made as well for dreamers staying here. But you know, this isn't something we actually have to debate too hard with the American people. There's relatively few Americans, according to the polls, that don't think that there should be a permanent solution for dreamers.
Our first call for you comes from Alexandria, Virginia. Our Democrats line, Steve, you're on with our guest, Representative Pramila Jayapal, the first vice chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Representative, I have a concern about this whole, you know, DACA thing now being closed, but, like, how will you deal with, like, continuing to go even though DACA is closed?
I don't think I understood your question, Steve. You said how will we continue to go?
Yeah, because, you know, DACA is closed and you're still going.
Do you mean that the DACA program is currently suspended and there's efforts to revive that?
Yeah.
Oh, well, actually, the DACA program, because it has been challenged in the courts, that was one thing I forgot to mention, is that the rescinding of the DACA program has been challenged in the courts. So when President Trump rescinded the program, a number of groups and states challenged that decision in the courts. The courts stayed his rescinding. So right now, the DACA program is in effect. People can continue to apply for renewals only, not for new applications. It was then taken to court, and the courts actually did rule that it needed to stay open, Steve. And so at that point, the Trump administration appealed that ruling. So it still isn't open for new applicants, but it is open for renewals of those who already had their DACA status. I hope that explains the answer.
Thank you for that. Steve in Reno, Nevada, Republican line. Hi.
Hello.
Steve, you're on. Go ahead.
I just wanted to know if the Congresswoman herself is a U.S. citizen.
Yes, absolutely. You have to be a U.S. citizen to be in Congress. So I'm a proud U.S. citizen. I became a citizen in 2000. I've actually lived in this country since I was 16 years old. And I'm not going to tell you my age, but I can promise you it's a very long time. So
you were born in India.
I was born in India, exactly. Born in India, came to the United States when I was 16 by myself, was on a whole host of visas. I came here on a student visa, took me 17 years, married to a U.S. citizen, have a U.S. citizen child, and have been here, have not been through the situation that some of these kids have been through, because everything I did was through the visa system, the existing visa system, which is very broken. We're talking about a DACA fix, but we need a whole fix for comprehensive immigration reform in general. That's something I've worked on for 15 years. Most of our immigration laws, and a lot of folks watching may not know this, have not been adjusted for decades. So, it keeps getting tossed back and forth because it's complicated. There are many pieces to the immigration system that include the employment visa system. It includes family reunification, which has been a cornerstone of U.S. Immigration policy. And then, of course, it includes the legalization of undocumented immigrants in this country, most of whom are picking the food that we eat, cleaning the hotel rooms that people might stay in, doing a lot of work in poultry plants across the United States, doing a lot of work that needs to be done. But we haven't had any kind of a system that matches our economic needs for labor to our immigration needs.
From Marlton, New Jersey, Independent Line, Mike is next. Hello.
Good morning. How are you today? I just want to ask the representative, is she part of the theory that the end justifies the means? And what does she think also of the lifeboat theory? Because this nation is the lifeboat. If you have 40 people on the lifeboat and you see someone swimming to you, if you pick that person up, meaning 41, the boat will sink. What are her ideas? Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question. My ideas are that we have a functioning immigration system that allows for us to know who's coming into the country, that allows for us to meet the economic needs of our country, and that allows for us to uphold our moral values and human values as the United States of America that has always been a beacon of hope for people from around the country. We have asylees and refugees, and we're part of international treaties that require us to take in and give credible fear interviews to asylees, for example, who are escaping poverty and war and drought across the world. So I would argue that everyone's best interests are served when we stop making immigration this political issue and we actually just recognize that immigration has always served our country, it always will, but what we need is a set of updated laws that actually respond to the needs of all of our country and all of our communities.
You talked about 17 years, your process of becoming American citizen. Right. Is what's the typical length, and how in the world, how could that be streamlined, I guess?
Well, it all has to do with how many people we allow and how quickly those visas get processed. So every visa category has a different sort of, qualification, if you will. This idea that it's easy it just comes from people who haven't been through it. And when people say, for example, to undocumented immigrants, we'll get to the back of the line, they don't know about the fact that the legal immigration system is completely broken. So let me give you an example. It really varies by country. But if you're Filipino and you apply for your adult child to come to the country, meaning perhaps you applied when they were a kid under 18, but then they age out. They go to a different category once they become adult children. It may take 22 years for your adult child to come to the United States, even if you are a legal permanent resident. And so this is the problem. You know, agricultural visas, these are visas in Republican districts across the country where farmers that I've worked with over the years who are Republican have been some of my strongest allies will tell me, you know, we need these workers, not just any worker, we need skilled agricultural workers. And so but they only get a very small number of visas. So they simply don't have the ability to bring folks to be able to do that work. Most of the undocumented population has been living here for 10, 15 years. So it's simply not feasible to say we're going to deport everybody. And in fact, I've asked Director Mulvaney from the Budget Office, the Congressional Budget Office as well, nonpartisan group, what would be the effects of a restrictive immigration policy like Representative Goodlatte is proposing. And it would destroy our economy. Industries across the country, agriculture, food, you know, poultry, dairy, all these industries would collapse. And it would be a huge moral blow to families because we have so many mixed status families now. We have people who are friends with those folks. So we need a real solution. And it's unfortunate that this president and Republicans have continued to demonize immigrants and lead chants where, you know, the president will say the word Latino and people will boo. To me, that's just deeply troubling to who we are as a country because the reality is we all came from somewhere. The president's wife came from somewhere. And we need to just make sure we have a system that actually functions so that people can get in and so that it's legal and we know who's here.
Our guest is a member of the Judiciary Subcommittee on Immigration and Border Security. Our next call is from John in Florida, Democrats line.
Yeah, you know, I used to be a progressive because the progressives seem to care about the environment, but they don't care about the working stiff. And you're talking about the farmers are in bed with the progressives because they need more pickers. Well, listen, my cousins up in New Jersey used to pick apples, and I had an ex-girlfriend that used to pick cotton in Arkansas. You know, Americans will do the job, but the farmers don't want them to work for. They don't care about conditions. They want them to work cheap, and that's why I'm not a progressive anymore, and I can't support the Democratic Party because all they care about is getting the illegal aliens, but make them citizens so they'll vote for Democrats.
Okay, John, thanks.
John, thank you so much for your call. And let me just say that I actually agree with you that we need to do far more for working people across this country. And I actually think of the word progressive, even though I'm a proud progressive, really we should call the things that we're proposing. And I just came to Congress as my first term. I've been an activist my whole life, fighting for working people, helping to raise the minimum wage, making sure that we have good jobs around the country, supporting labor unions, which have really built our middle class here in the country, making sure that we're transitioning workers to jobs that they can do in their hometowns. So I am fully with you, and I think that these ideas that we are proposing as progressive Democrats are actually centrist ideas. They speak to the center of the country. They speak to the working person. You use the word stiff. I would say our working heroes who are actually powering our industries and our economy across the country, and we have not done enough for you. We need to raise the minimum wage. We need to invest in infrastructure and jobs. And yes, we need to make sure that the wages are high enough that Americans will do the job and create a level playing field so that every person, whether you're an immigrant or whether you're an American born, that you are playing on the same field. That's why, actually, I think we need immigration reform, because that will do that, but we need much more than that. We need to invest in higher education. You know, we have $1.4 trillion in student loan debt. And, John, I believe that you and I want the same things. We want to be able to have a job that pays a decent wage, put food on the table, put a roof over our heads, send our kids to college or higher education, and then ultimately retire with some dignity. That's what I'm working for.
From New York, Republican line, Dan, you are next. Hi.
Hi, I'm a refugee. It took me 15 years to be as a child because of my father, who worked with the United States during World War II, to be accepted into this country. And our burden was to prove that we have something to offer. Now, I know a lot of the people who are here illegally have more or less proven themselves one way or the other. So I can see the point of giving these people an opportunity. But to just open the gate, like all these people from Central America come here, it's a question of whether can they do anything in their own country? Can we help them do anything in their own country? Because we can't just admit the whole world here, people with nothing to offer, no skills. And, after a while, we're not going to need chicken pickers anymore or chicken pluckers anymore and fruit pickers. We're really going to need people with skill, because automation is changing a lot of things, and you're just not saying anything concrete and real.
Okay, Dan, apologies. We'll have to leave it there only for sake of time.
Thanks, Dan. Actually, if we had time, believe me, I've worked on the system for 15 years. I have plenty concrete and real about how we make sure that we have a system that works, number one, so that we can determine who comes in and who comes out. It's not like we're opening the borders. Nobody's suggesting that. I will tell you that circular flow migration in the 1980s, when we had laws around who could come in, but it was much easier to come in and go out, and we could keep track of people, allowed people to come in for seasonal work and then go home. The minute we started building border walls and putting all kinds of restrictions on who could come in, not updating the immigration system, that's when we started to have the problem of people coming in and not leaving. So there are a lot of pieces to this, and I also believe that we should be investing in diplomacy, in development, in helping other countries to achieve economic success, and not cutting, as President Trump and the Republicans have proposed, cutting the State Department by a third, cutting development assistance by a third. That is not the right way to go, because you're right. We do have to care about the rest of the world. We have to engage with the rest of the world and build coalitions to help bring stability and parity around the world.
Just a few more minutes with our guests. So Peter from Seattle, Washington on our independent line. Go right ahead.
So hello. Thank you for taking my call, CSPAN. Hello, Mrs. Pramila.
Hello.
Very good to talk to you. Before I make a question, do you remember me? Because I've been trying to reach you.
Peter,
do you remember me?
I don't think so.
Just go ahead with your question or comment. We're running really short on time. Go right ahead.
You were in a relationship together. Do you remember?
Let's go to Joe in Holtzville, New York, Democrats line.
How you doing?
Go ahead.
Hi there.
Yeah, I'm 64 years old, so I've been around. I've seen the country change in so many ways since when I was a kid and to what it looks like today. And I know President Johnson changed the laws to allow more immigrants from third world nations into the country. But I'm worried that this country is going to look like India in another 50 years with 1 billion people, and I think it's wrong. These countries have to start helping themselves. We can't take the burden of these other countries and relax their country so that they have more people. I mean, what is it going to say we took a 500 million people from India into this country? How long do you think it's going to take before that other 500 million is in India?
Okay, Joe, I'll have to stop you there again for sake of time.
Joe. Nobody's talking about taking 500 million people in. I mean, we are just using this immigration issue. President Trump and Republicans are putting fear into regular folks' minds like you, because nobody is talking about that. What we are talking about is an economy that actually requires labor. If you look at the United States, part of the reason our economics are strong is because we have a growing labor force, unlike Japan that has zero immigration, unlike a number of other countries that don't allow immigrants in and are now suffering and having to think about how they change that policy. So all we're talking about is, let's remind ourselves that we have hearts, that the United States was built by immigrants, that we have a Statue of Liberty, and then let's look at our laws and actually try to revise our laws instead of using immigrants as political footballs. We have not revised our laws substantially on immigration for decades. If people understood how many visas we have for different work categories, it would change everything. But if I start to talk about that, people would glaze out and not listen because it's very boring. But the reality is that we have an immigration system that has not been adapted to our needs and to our families. If we could put that into place, all the people who are worried about too many immigrants coming to this country would be pleasantly surprised, because you would actually see that we would have a rhyme and a reason and a system to allow people in, to allow ourselves to still have values and to be leaders in the world. You know, one thing that troubles me, and I know we have to wrap up here, is that the United States has always played a critical global leadership role. We are, under this president, becoming isolationist. We are refusing to keep up with the commitments we've made around the Iran deal, around the Paris Accord. And Europe is now saying to us, you know what? We can't depend on the United States anymore. China and Russia are saying, hey, this is great. This is an opportunity for us to come in and be the world superpower. We cannot go it alone. This is a global world. Globalization has made it so, and we have to be at the forefront of creating that global coalition that's going to take us into the future.
Our guest is the first vice chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. She is also a Democrat who serves the state of Washington, a member of the Judiciary Subcommittee on Immigration and Border Security. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.